Well, folks, here we are again on Friday morning. Of course, this last week we once again seen very warm conditions and considerable amount of wind, and that does have us concerned with the drying potential, as we've seen a very dry air mass and very high fire indices. We're sucking some of that soil moisture that's remaining at the surface away, and we need to replenish it. We did see some scattered thunderstorm activity develop during the Wednesday night into the Tuesday time frame across portions of south central and southeast Nebraska, and then of course we've seen the cold front try to work its way through the state during the last 24 hours. It did generate some severe weather and scattered thunderstorm activity across eastern Nebraska, but left much of western Nebraska high and dry. Now, as we go through this next 7-day period, we do have the opportunity for some precipitation, particularly as we get into the early part of next week, and the possibility of some freezing temperatures moving into at least the panhandle as we get into the Tuesday time frame. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store as we move through this next 7-day period. And as we go to the upper air models, what we'll show you is that the trough that was responsible for some of the scattered thunderstorm activity is now moving into the Ohio River Valley and weakening as it progresses eastward. And we're turning our attention to the Pacific Northwest, where another trough is starting to move in and will rapidly move into the Central Plains as we move through this next 7-day period, and eventually move that energy out into the plains in the early part of the week. So for today, we're going to see temperatures primarily in the low 70s across the northeast to the upper 70s across the southwest, and we'll start to see a ridge building in as we go into tomorrow. And as we go into tomorrow, what we're going to see is a ridge starting to build back up. Southwest flow in the upper atmosphere is going to lead to some very warm temperatures as we're looking at highs in the low 80s across the northeast to the upper 80s across the southwest. And it would not surprise me whatsoever that if we see some low 90s across portions of extreme southwestern Nebraska. Now, as we get into Sunday, we're going to notice that trough starts to dig in rather deeply into the western United States, and of course we're going to see very warm conditions spreading out into at least the eastern half of Nebraska. We'll be looking at highs in the upper 80s across the southeast and possibly south central Nebraska. As we get up into the northwestern part of the state, we're saying low 80s, and that's dependent on how quickly this cold front at the surface moves through. If it moves through early in the day, we're going to drop temperatures at least 10 degrees from these highs. If it's a little slower, then we'll paint these highs. But we'll see an increase in thunderstorm activity as we go through the overnight hours. Now, depending on which model we run, we look at either this low cutting off or we see a trough progressing across. And the model I'm using is indicating that this low will move out and then cut off from the main flow, and that will keep some of the cool air at bay. So we may be looking at highs in the mid-60s across the northwest to the low 80s across the southeast. Now, if this comes as one trough, we can drop about 10 to 15 degrees off of these highs, and we will see an increase in thunderstorm activity. But right now, with this model, we keep the heaviest of this precipitation to the south of us. By the time we get to Tuesday, we'll see this upper air low progressing eastward, and we'll be looking at temperatures that will be in the upper 50s across the north to the mid-60s across the south, and we probably will see freezing temperatures with a hard freeze possible across the panhandle as we get into Tuesday morning. Now, by the time we get to Wednesday, we'll see that this system moves well to our east. Ridging starts to replace the troughing, and we'll see highs start to move back up, mid-60s east to low 70s west. And as we get into Thursday, we'll start to see that ridge redeveloping. We're looking at highs in the low 70s in the east to the upper 70s across the west. The 8 to 14-day forecast indicates warm air moving into our region, and as we get into the precipitation forecast, we'll notice a drier trend moving in from the southwest into the central plains.